I'm going to go through quite a few of the features of the Veeam Availability Suite today, explain what you can do with it and how you can best protect your data from data loss or corruption. So a little bit about Veeam first of all. Veeam is 10 years old this year. We've been going since 2006 with our first backup product back in 2008. We call ourselves a virtualization first company, and that's because we started in the virtualized space. So whether that was VMware or Hyper-V, that's where we started. So we didn't come from that physical backup solution and then move into the virtualized. We're actually doing it slightly the other way around. And I'll talk about what we can do with your physical workloads as well as your public cloud workloads later on. We have a key philosophy at Veeam as well that IT should just work. If you see any of our advertising, it is branded with the "It Just Works" tagline, and that was actually came from a customer that came up with that tagline before we trademarked it, obviously. And we do this by, we believe we need to keep it nice and simple. You shouldn't be spending hours of every day worrying about your backups, worrying about your replicas and your DR and your business continuity. It should just work straight out of the box. You should be able to set it up and walk away. And so we provide a wide range of products that will assist with that. And these are our current products on the screen now. So the one most people are aware of is the backup and replication, but we also do some monitoring solutions, so you can do bare metal monitoring within Veeam One, or for any of you Microsoft customers running System Center Operations Manager, we do a management pack for that to give you that bare metal monitoring, so you can proactively monitor your virtualized infrastructure and actually see when things are going to go wrong. We've got a couple of new products coming out, the Veeam Agent for Windows and the Veeam Agent for Linux, and I'll talk about those later, but that's how you protect your physical and your public cloud workloads. So one of our key features is the ability to recover that data quickly. In total, there are probably about 50 different ways of recovering data within the Veeam solution. And whether it's just a simple file level recovery or a full VM recovery. But what we do offer is, in our high-speed recovery options, we have what we call our instant VM recovery. That allows us, in the event of a virtual machine failing, we can stream back from the backup file, that VM, present it to your Hyper-V or your VMware host, mount it and power it on. That whole process takes about 2 minutes from you being notified that that server is offline to you having that server back up and running. Later on during the day, you can do your full online migration, which is the actual restore. So if it was a host failure, for example, you can stream the VMs that would have gone to that host to different hosts, repair the host, and then do the full restore. And that is all without any interruption in service other than the 2 minutes it took to spin this VM up. We also offer full testing in our product, so it's always a good question when we're talking to people is to ask how often they test their backups. Backup testing is, if you like, a necessary evil, that you have to do the test restores just to make sure you've got confidence in them. So what we can do is we can actually automate that testing, and very much like we do that instant VM recovery, what we can do is we can spin up multiple VMs. But they are ring-fenced and isolated and streamed straight from your backup file. This allows you to test that the backup has actually worked properly, that the virtual machine that's on it is bootable, the operating system is running. Any application layer you've got on those machines, you can script your own tests, you can do whatever tests you want on those, and fully test your backups. Once you've finished, you just stop publishing that short backup task, those machines spin back down, and you're now safe in the knowledge that your backup works. And if you do need to recover that data, if you do need to recover those VMs, you can do so straight from those backup files. So it's much better than just a checksum test, you know, oh yeah, the files match, it must be working. This actually tests properly. Another useful feature we can do, again using that same streaming technology, is you can actually put your backups to some use. So typically when you back up stuff, you don't touch it again unless you need to restore it. So what we allow you to do is actually create an on-demand sandbox from your backup files. So exactly the same way as we spun those machines up in the Sure Backup task, we can spin those machines up again, but now we can gateway you into them, and you can actually go and do things like your monthly Windows updates, test them on what is effectively a replica of your production environment, because it is actually the backup of your production environment. I mean, I've been in IT for 30 years now, give or take a year or two. And I've seen lots of development environments where people will test patches, they'll test updates to applications and stuff like that. In 30 years, I've never seen a dev environment that looks anything like a production environment. Typically, the runtimes are all over the place, or people install stuff and forget to uninstall it, or actually believe that the uninstall has worked. So by using our on-demand sandbox, you actually get an apples-to-apples comparison for those patches, and you can then go away and apply those patches to your production environment, safe in the knowledge that they will work. Another feature we offer are our explorers, and this is predominantly around the Microsoft stack, so anything you have on-prem in the Microsoft stack and all your server products, we have explorers for pretty much all of them. So the first one is our Explorer for Exchange. So historically, if you wanted to recover an Exchange object, you'd have to restore the entire Exchange server, mount the EDB file, and start exporting those objects. And you'd have to do that all offline because the Exchange environment wouldn't like to have two Exchange servers with the same name running. And trust me, I've done it, and it was a pain. So what we've got is our Explorer for Exchange. So directly from the backup console, you can right-click on that backup file and select the option to restore Exchange items. What that will do is in the background it'll mount your backup file and it will open the EDB file directly. You can now browse through your Exchange server, find the email items you want, find the calendar entries you want, pretty much anything inside that EDB file. You can find, you literally just right click on it and you can restore it back to Exchange. You can export it as a PST file. You can email it back to the user who owns it. All of this within 2 or 3 clicks to launch the Explorer and recover those objects. Very powerful tool. Our second Explorer is our Explorer for Active Directory. So again, in exactly the same way as we did with Exchange, you right-click and restore Active Directory objects. That will open up the ntds.dit file, which is your Active Directory database, and allow you to browse through your Active Directory. You can now restore any security objects, so that's users and computers, and it restores those with their security intact. So it keeps the computer password, it keeps the user password, which most legacy backup solutions will not allow you to do. They'll allow you to restore the object, but all the SIDs and passwords will be stripped out of those. And if that was a container of 500 workstations, you'd actually have to go and visit 500 workstations, disjoin and rejoin them to the domain just to reinstate the security. We do it with the security intact. Some other useful features of the Active Directory Explorer are the ability to restore things like integrated DNS records, group policy objects, as well as configuration partitions. Yet another good feature of this one is the ability to directly compare attributes on objects in Active Directory. So we don't just look at the backup, we actually speak to your production domain controllers as well whilst we're doing this process. And so if a GPO was changed and you don't know who changed it, why it was changed, what actually changed, you can directly compare those attributes and look and see what was changed, and it allows you to troubleshoot problems a lot quicker and gets you back up and running a lot quicker. We're also doing an Explorer for SQL. This will allow you to restore databases and tables, but in addition to that, we can restore a SQL database to the transaction that caused the problem. So as well as backing up that entire virtual machine that SQL is running on, we will browse into it, we will give you the option to restore that database by mounting that backup, but then it will then replay out the transaction logs to the point you specify. So you can open up the transaction log file in the backup and say, I want to restore to that specific point in time. And that, again, it will replay out the transaction log. That gives you a recovery point objective of the event that caused the problem. We recently introduced that same functionality for Oracle as well. So if your VM is running Oracle, you can restore that Oracle database to the specific transaction. and that's irrespective of whether Oracle's running on Windows or on Linux. For anyone out there who's using SharePoint, we've also enhanced our Explorer for SharePoint. So not only can you recover SharePoint content, and the SharePoint content is exactly the same way as you recover any of the other objects, you just find it, right-click and then restore. You can also restore entire sites, and you can email them. Typically with SharePoint, you'd email that object back to the user who lost it or who owned it, and they can re-upload it into SharePoint. So the other thing to be aware of, it is backup and replication, so it's not two separate products. There's no bolt-ons or add-ins for the replication piece. It's a full replication suite in there, which does near continuous data protection. So what I mean by near continuous is it's not real-time replication. If you create a replication task, it will run that replication task. If you set that replication task to run continuously, what it will do is it will run the replication task. When it's finished, it will replica again. When it replicas, you can re-IP that virtual machine. So if your DR site is on a different subnetting scheme or has different DNS servers or whatever, you can make all of those changes, and that will replicate and include those changes in the replica. When the replica is delivered to your remote site, it's delivered as a switched off VM, ready for you to fail over to it should the need arise. In addition to just being able to fail over a virtual machine, we also do what we call failover plans. That allows you to fail over an entire application stack or an application group with a single click. So it's literally right-click fail over that application stack. That will allow you to fail over those machines in a predefined order and with a predefined gap between each server coming up. Very useful if that application has dependencies and you do have to fail over that entire application stack. It will make sure that everything's up and running ready for you. We also offer what we call planned failovers. It's slightly lost in translation and a little confusing with the failover plans and planned failovers. However, a planned failover will allow you to basically schedule a failover. And you can schedule multiple failovers, so multiple virtual machine failovers. Very useful if you're doing something like a data center migration. And with a scheduled failover, it does things slightly different, because what it will do is it will shut down your production VM first of all, do one last replication, and then do a permanent failover to the remote site. That means you've got no loss of data in the failover process. There's no gap between where it shut down and where it came up in terms of that actual data. So if you were doing a big data center migration from one site to another, or even just onto new hardware, it doesn't need to be into a different site. It could be you're just failing over to new hardware or into a new environment. You can take advantage of our scheduled failovers. Now, where you are running multiple sites, WAN links have got much better in recent years, and quite often you've got fairly speedy links between WANs. WAN link speed typically isn't too much for a problem in terms of replicas, because everything we do in Veeam, other than the first one, is going to be incremental. However, if you do have high latency WAN links, then we'd offer what we call our WAN accelerator, which is basically a caching mechanism which ensures that no data block is ever sent across the WAN more than once. So that will give you anything up to 50 times faster throughput across your WAN links with your backup and replication tasks. Now, you may want to get that data off-site. So we work with a number of cloud partners across the UK and across the world with our Cloud Connect partner program to allow you to use both backup and DR as a service. That means you can back up into our cloud partners, or you can replica into our cloud partners, and they will host the infrastructure for that. Some of the new features we've added, particularly around the Microsoft stack. So workloads typically I mean, the recent trend was for workloads to go into the physical work, into the virtualized workspace. So gone are the big data centers full of physical servers running each application. People have invested in the hardware and they've got the virtualization platforms, and it's a lot easier to manage. But as we move forward, a lot of services are going up into public cloud. So we now give you the option to actually do a direct restore into the public cloud, so into Azure specifically. And you can do this directly from your Veeam console. You literally right-click on the backup file, and it gives you the option there to restore to Microsoft Azure. And it may be you're moving a workload into Azure. It may be that you're having some on-site problems and you need to move some stuff into Azure. It may also mean that you just want to do some testing in Azure. So you can quickly and easily move those backups into Azure and get those services up and running in the public cloud environment. Okay, so one of the features we have is our Enterprise Manager. This is basically a web interface into Veeam. And what it does is it allows you to manage multiple Veeam backup and replication services. So if you've got multiple offices with multiple locations and different instances of Veeam kicking around in that, you can install the Enterprise Manager, and that will allow you to confederate all of those different Veeam instances into one manageable console. But what else you can do with that is actually grant granular permissions. This is an Enterprise Plus feature within Veeam. But if you're a larger organization and you want to grant your service desk specific permissions to take the load off of your backup administrators, you can do so. So you could grant your service desk the ability to restore specific file types based on file extensions. You could give your DBAs the ability to recover databases on their own without having to trouble your backup administrator. There's even the ability to recover Exchange content that you could grant to your service desk, which is usually frowned upon because Exchange content is typically quite sensitive. However, with the granular rights on the Enterprise Manager, those service desk users never actually get to see inside the mailbox. They can just restore to a point in time, and it will basically restore anything that's missing that was in the backup that is no longer in that user's mailbox. So it gives you that information, that granular permissions. But it also gives you the ability to offer self-service recoveries. So if your user has permissions to a specific file in a specific location, they can again go through the Enterprise Manager web interface and actually recover their own data. So it makes things a lot easier and takes a lot of the load off of the server administrators, the service desk, and the backup administrators. Another feature we added with version 9 was the ability to do scale-out backup repositories. So previously, if you were doing your backups, you would define a backup target or a repository, and that would be where you would send all your backups to. You would have to ensure that there was sufficient space on that backup repository for all of your backups to run, and you'd also have to pre-provision space for your future requirements. Now what we can do is a scale-out backup repository is effectively it's a repository of repositories. So you can create one scale-out backup repository and just add different storage from different locations into this scale-out backup repository. You can then define where jobs go based on policy. Now, if you do then run out of storage, it's easy to spin up some new storage, and that storage doesn't have to be physical storage somewhere. It could be an SMB share that's underutilized in your own environment, for example. But you can create, anywhere you can create some storage, you can then create a repository, add it to the scale-out backup repository. If your normal repository has run out of space, what the job will do is it will automatically in the background work out where it can put this backup task now, because it hasn't got room to put it in its initial repository, and it will do a lift and shift of that entire backup chain and move it to the new repository, all without any user interaction on your part. All of your jobs, you would just target the scale-out backup repository. Historically, if you wanted to move a backup job from one repository to another, you would literally have to modify the job to point to the new repository and then trigger the start of the incremental chain again with a full backup. This takes care of all of that for you. We do also work with a number of hardware vendors in terms of not only the source storage, so we work with the likes of HPE, EMC on the VNX range, NetApp, Nimble, and other guys on how we integrate with the production storage, but we also work with those vendors in backup storage. So where you want to retain that backup for any length of time or for long-term retention, you may be looking at deduplicated storage for your backups. And again, we work closely with EMC on their data domain piece. We work very closely with Exagrid on theirs, as well as HPE on their store once range. And it allows us to integrate directly with that storage and actually deliver the data correctly for that storage to make it work more efficiently. Okay, so Server 2016 has just gone live a few weeks ago. So Server 2016 has come with a new file system that's available for it, and that's REFS version 3. Now, the previous versions of REFS were quite good, but most people didn't go for it, predominantly because it was a version 1 release at the time. It would have taken a bit of thought, so most people stayed with their NTFS file infrastructures. However, as a backup target, your backup storage, REFS 3 now makes a lot of sense, as it does use fast block cloning, and it does allow for the ability to share blocks between multiple multiple data files. So effectively, if your backup storage is using an REFS 3 file infrastructure, you're going to get some very good storage optimizations, and you will use a lot less storage than you did previously. For anyone out there still using tape, I mean, tape was one of those things. We didn't actually support tape until I think it was version 6.5. We actually added tape in based on customer feedback, because at the end of the day, tape is still the cheapest medium to get your data offsite. So we added tape in version 6.5, and we've continued to enhance that tape support. So we will support any tape device that's LTO 3 and above. We would prefer it had native Windows drivers. However, that is not essential. But we don't use any third-party drivers in our tape libraries, and we use the standard Windows tape file format for writing to tape. So it keeps it all nice and neat, nice and tidy if you're still using tape. So some of the other features we added just recently in version 9.5. So for all you Hyper-V guys out there who have been looking at the VMware guys and saying, oh, they've got change block tracking, that's really awesome, and wish we could do that. The Veeam product has always had its own change block tracking with Hyper-V. We integrate directly with Hyper-V, and what we used to do is we used to inject a little real mode driver into your Hyper-V host to enable change block tracking. Hyper-V has finally caught up and has now got resilient change tracking, or because they couldn't call it change block tracking, obviously. That now makes a lot of things a lot easier, and it actually speeds up your backup process, because it's not having to scan and compare your backup files and look at those different backup files. And we've made a lot of enhancements under the hood in terms of our throughput control and our actual speed. So some of the new features, did touch on these very briefly earlier, our Veeam Agents. Okay, so anyone who's known anything about Veeam over the years knows we use no agents anywhere. Everything we do uses native APIs within VMware, it uses native APIs within Hyper-V. So why have we started with agents? The agents are there for your remaining physical devices or your public cloud-based devices, whether they be in Azure or AWS or wherever they are. You can now install an agent on those. So those machines we didn't used to be able to back up, we can now back up. So those physical Linux devices in this case, and hopefully, fingers crossed, the Veeam agent for Linux is going to go public tomorrow, was the last I heard, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one, but it should be going gold tomorrow. That allows you to back up any Debian-based Linux physical or public cloud device. Now, the agents are licensed slightly different, so if for normal Veeam licensing on your virtual workloads, we license per physical CPU socket on the protected hosts or any host that we target a backup job towards. The agents, however, will be licensed on a per agent basis, and that will be on a subscription model, so they'll be licensed per agent per year. But they do come with things like the 24/7 support. So the Veeam Backup and Replication offers 2 support tiers. You've got 24/7, or you've got a working hours, which I believe is 8 till 6 in your region. The agents, however, will be licensed 24/7. They will come in multiple flavors, and we'll just skip to the agent for that's the agent for Linux. No, let's get the right agent. Yeah, they will be multiple versions. The workstation version, which will back up to your Veeam repository, wherever that may be, so if that's a cloud-based repository, and some people do use cloud-based repositories, you can spin up a Hyper-V VM with some storage and make that a repository server to and send your backups off to Azure. The Workstation Edition is for anything that doesn't need to be application aware. So if you need to quiesce any running applications like SQL, like Exchange, like Active Directory, you're going to want to look at our server version, and that will be fully application aware, so you won't just end up with a crash consistent backup of that physical device or that public cloud device. In addition to that, you've got multiple options on how you back up. So you can do a full system level backup, which will basically enable you to do a full bare metal recovery of that virtual machine. But you can also reduce that to a volume level backup or even a file and folder level backup. So if it's just a file and print server, you may just want to back up the data locations on that. You've got all of those options. It's the Linux one. Another new feature that's actually in public beta at the moment is our Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 email. Again, that's licensed per mailbox, and that's on a subscription model. So as people are moving away from on-prem Exchange servers and going into that Office 365 environment for their emails, Office 365 email gives you a 30-day retention policy on any deleted objects within that environment. Typically, that's not a lot of room for maneuvering if you need to restore an email back from 6 months ago, a year ago. Certainly in financial institutions, they have to keep copies of those transactions for anything up to 7 years. The way Azure get around that is by offering the litigation vault in Office 365, but that can make recovery of those objects quite difficult and also add to the cost and complexity. So what we will be providing is the ability to recover those objects, and the recovery is going to be exactly the same way as we'd looked at with the Exchange recovery earlier. You can just browse straight into that backup file and recover those individual objects nice and easily. This should be coming out very shortly. We have another new tool coming out soon as well, which is the Veeam Availability Console. This is a new console that will manage all of the components we spoke about earlier. So it not only is you've got your backup and replication console, but this will also manage all of your agents as well, and give you the overview and the ability to recover, the ability to manage all your backup jobs for that entire hybrid environment. So your services may be running in Azure and you've got the backups going. You can manage those backups from here. You can do your recoveries from here. Another new product is our Veeam Availability Orchestrator. This one isn't quite in beta yet, or not in public beta yet. There's an internal beta. And this is for orchestrating and securing your DR. So typically for your disaster recovery, you will create lots of replication tasks to replicate you from site A to site B, and you'll create all those jobs, and you can, in your VMware environments, you can test those jobs using our Shore Replica, which works the same way as a Shore Backup. We don't have that option in our Hyper-V environment, unfortunately, at the moment, but that is coming. But what this will allow you to do is basically script all of your DR. So you can tell it, you can put in a little script that says, I want this server to fail over or to replica to this site. I want this server to replica here, there, all of that. And what it will do is in the background, it will go and create all the tasks that are required to make that happen. In addition to creating those tasks, it will then provide you with the documentation to support that and will allow you to do your DR testing from within the orchestrator. So rather than having to create multiple jobs, you just literally tell it what jobs you want it to create and it will do them for you and give you that full testing functionality. So we're on to our monitoring piece now. So we, as I said earlier, we offer two monitoring tools. The main one is Veeam One, and these form part of our availability suite. So we sell Veeam as either Veeam Backup and Replication or Veeam 1, or the two combined as their availability suite. Now what this does is it gives you bare metal monitoring, so metal up monitoring. It will look at your storage, it will look at the tin, it will look at the compute, it will look at your network utilization, and will give you about 200 different alarms or alerts on what's going on your virtualized infrastructure. In addition to that, there's about 120 different reports available to you, and it allows you to do various things like capacity planning and allow for what-if scenarios. So you can actually look and see your utilization. And it gives you billing and chargeback effectively, so you can actually see which departments are using which resources, and if some environments will actually charge individual departments for their IT use, or you may be running as a managed service provider and need to bill your individual customers for those shared resources. This will give you all of that. And as I said earlier, for anyone using System Center Operations Manager, we also have the management pack for that. That can be substituted for Veeam 1 in the availability suite. Again, it gives you very similar reporting, but this time it's within that System Center Operations Manager console. So that's the bulk of the presentation. I was a little quicker than I was expecting. So I'm going to see if we've got any questions, or if anyone needs any more information, or if anyone wants to know anything. But in this instance, I will hand back to Jordan for any questions.
Jeff, thank you very, very much for that. Just going to sort of leave a minute or two for any of the guys to pop the questions in. If anyone does have any questions, there's a questions tab and actually a chat tab on the menu, so please feel free to ask any questions. If you do have anything that comes up post-webinar, get in touch with us regarding any questions, any queries you've got. Give us a call, 01364 654 100, or drop us an email to maildesk@greymatter.com. We'll be able to organise things like demos, pricing, obviously free trials, things like that for you if necessary. We've just had someone write in, can we get a recording of the presentation? I believe myself and Leanne will be putting together a mail shot after the webinar has been completed this afternoon, and we'll get a recording off to you guys within a few days, I believe. Possibly a week, but we will be sending out all attendees a copy of the webinar that's been recorded and the slide deck for you to look at over the course of the next few days, possibly a week. But yes, we will get that out to you guys.
Just one other thing from my perspective. Moving forward, if anyone needs any additional information, they can feel free to reach out to Grey Matter or to myself. If anyone wants any demos or any more in-depth presentations and reviews of infrastructure, we're more than happy to help with that and to assist Grey Matter in providing any of that for you.
Just leave a few more moments just in case anyone's got any further questions. Information is on screen now, so if you want to give us a call, drop us an email. If anything does come up once we've come off of the webinar, we're happy to help where we can. As Jeff mentioned, we've got a great relationship with Veeam. We can offer, like I say, demos, trials, conference calls with specialists like Jeff, who you can fire your questions at around the product, bits and pieces like that. So please do take note of the details. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up from there. Thank you everyone who attended. Hopefully you found it useful. All our details are on screen now. Hopefully you've got the information you need. As mentioned, we'll be putting everything together and sending out an email with a recording and the slides for the presentation over the following week. Please do get in touch if you need anything in the meantime. And once again, Jeff, thank you very, very much.